Well, welcome everyone to breakout session 4. In this session, we're going to be dealing with hospitality with heart and soul. And it's really a question of thinking about the way that the hospitality sector is engaging with local communities, and both in terms of the employment development, in terms of economic development. And we have a panel that consists of 3 other folk, and I'll introduce them in a second, but just to sort of set the scene for you, my name is Ben Martin, and I work in the advisory group for HKS, and I've been doing feasibility and market analysis for hotel development for just over 25 years all over the world. And one of the things that I've been very aware of recently is the importance of engaging with local communities in a very sustainable way, whether that's in the Arctic Circle or whether that's in Africa in terms of agritourism. And it's a matter which has come to the fore over the last few weeks when hotels essentially have had to step up and engage in different ways, helping local communities and engaging with the public sector authorities in their areas. But let me take you through the panelists. They're going to introduce themselves, and I'll go around one by one. But essentially, we have 3. The first one of those is Madhu Rajesh, who's a director of International Tourism Partnership. Then we have Paul Gardiner, who's the CEO of the Mantis Collection. And then we have an innovation consultant who's been working with Mantis for many, many years, Craig Llewelyn-Williams. So I'm going to go around everybody in turn and ask them a little bit to explain a little bit about who they are and what they do. And we're going to start with Madhu. So Madhu, can you just tell us a little bit about what is the International Tourism Partnership and how did you get into it? Just set the scene for us.
Sure. So International Tourism Partnership is a membership organization. We work with 16 of the world's largest hotel companies that have committed to collaborate on sustainability agenda and to tackle some of the most pressing issues that our industry faces by collaborating. Together as a collective, we represent about 25% of the industry, 30,000 hotel rooms as part of the membership, and focus on some of the most material issues and risks that the industry faces from a responsible growth point of view. About me, and how I got here, I spent 10 years of my career when I first started working for different hotel companies, Marriott, Hilton, Taj, Starwood. So I understand how grassroots level operations in hotels work. And then I made a transition to the not-for-profit sector with a focus on various issues like youth employment, human rights, climate change, etc. And so 2 years ago, when I took up the role as Director of International Tourism Partnership, it just seemed to bring 2 decades of my career together. So here I am.
Perfect. And in a little while, we're going to have an opportunity for Madhu to share us a bit of a presentation about that. But before we do that, I just wondered, what was your greatest frustration that you find with the hotel and hospitality sector revolving around these subjects that you've highlighted and introduced?
I actually would prefer to focus on a positive instead of a frustration. I think one of the biggest trends that I've seen for the industry in the last 2 years that I've been in this role is that actually it is quite unique in how the industry's come together to put its weight behind a shared agenda. And how openly and transparently various companies that may compete in the external business world, but actually do believe in the power of solidarity and collaboration on some of the most difficult challenges that they're trying to address. And that's really unique. I haven't seen that across many other industry sectors. And I've been told by external stakeholders as well that they would love to have a unique collaboration like this across their own industries. What we see, what that does in practice is really our membership comes together to form innovative solutions to some of these challenges. And then we, through ITP, are able to make them available to the broader industry to adapt and replicate. So that it's a very powerful coalition for action.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's shift across now to Paul. And Paul, I'm guessing that your background is somewhat different. And Mantis is one of those names that we hear a lot about in the industry. It's not as well known as some hotel brands, but it's got an interesting story and a fascinating future. But tell us a little bit about how you came to be the CEO of Mantis and just an introduction to the Mantis Collection, just briefly.
Sure. Thank you very much, Ben. And thanks all the listeners and Bench for putting on this amazing platform and event today. Obviously, lots of sympathy for our industry. I've been getting calls from so many different people. So, you know, it's been a humbling few weeks for all of us. Anyway, we hopefully grow from strength to strength, and this is a great opportunity just to present our case and where we are and everything else. So, yeah, I mean, my journey started way back as a teenager, because my father started a safari park, or we would call it a game reserve in South Africa, called Shamwari back in the very early 1990s. And so I started as a game ranger, and then worked my way into marketing. And I had a great mentor. His name was Dani Malan, the late Dani Malan. And he sort of took me under his wing and taught me everything there was to know about marketing. So my background is really marketing, and I tend to enjoy that, particularly in this industry. And because we play in the sort of luxury and adventure space, it makes it even more fun. And so, yeah, I guess, you know, it's a family business, and through years of working for the group, I've worked my way up to CEO, and we've got a wonderful team underneath us today. And, you know, we all still very much look up to Dad for inspiration and guidance. He's one of the most optimistic people on the planet. You know, while our world is burning down, he's always looking for opportunities. And he's in the middle of the scrum as a 77-year-old, fighting for our survival and trying to secure the jobs of all of our staff and everything else. So it's a tough time, but together we're united as a family, because my younger brother is also caught up in all of this. He's got a tour operator called Gilt Edge Travel. They're one of the biggest inbounds into South Africa. And so the three of us are fighting this war with our wives behind us and the rest of the family. So, but it's a lovely little business today. Mantis is all about eco lodges and boutique hotels spread around the continent of Africa. We've got a nice little presence in the UK now too, and our tentacles are reaching far and wide with our partners Accor, who acquired 50% of our business 2 years ago. So that's a little introduction, and I know we're going to dig a little bit deeper. So,
but I suppose one of the things that springs to mind quite quickly is, so did your father have some strange fascination with insects? Or so what's with the whole mantis thing, and what was his vision there?
So Dad's mentor, I mean, when he started that game reserve 30 years ago, he was essentially one of the first people to rewild. So he started bringing back all the animals that had been destroyed over a period of 200 years, from the little dung beetle all the way through to the elephants and the prime predators. And through doing that, because obviously all the sheep, goats, and cattle were tossed off the land that had been bought there over the centuries, and of course there were lots of farmers surrounding this now new game reserve, and that they all took one look at Dad, and they used to brag about how their great grandfathers were responsible for shooting the last hyena and whatever else. And there was Dad on his own, having to try and re-establish this wildlife. And all these farmers said, you know what, we're going to give this idiot 2 years, he'll be gone. All the naysayers. And one man stood up for Dad, and that was Dr. Ian Player. If you're a golfer, that's Gary Player's older brother. And Ian Player was what Gary was to golf, Ian was to conservation. And he really believed in what Dad was doing, and he stood up for him. And he just said, you got to keep your head down and just soldier on. And the rest is history. I mean, Shamwari became one of the most popular reserves in our country. And it's such a cool, sustainable ecotourism model today, which you could almost roll out anyway. But Ian Player was responsible for coming up with the name, because Dad asked him to, that he was struggling to come up with a name, and we could have called it the Platinum Collection or whatever, but we wanted to go with something unique, and Dr. Ian Player came up with the name. And there's a whole story behind that, which I won't go into now because we don't have time, but the acronym is beautiful. So it is after the Prey Mantis, and if you look at my little jacket here, you'll see our little logo, which is kind of like a Nike swoosh. It's very simple, but the acronym is beautiful. It's particularly in this day and age that we're living in. It's man and nature together is sustainable.
And I think everyone would probably agree that one of the things that we're all going to be reflecting on as a consequence of the situation that we find ourselves in today is going to resolve around that question of sustainability and man and nature. I'm hearing so many references to recalibrating, recuperating, restoration, recovery, all of those good terms.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how that's going to play out and hospitality's role in that. But we'll get into the relationship between Mantis and the community in a little while. But next, Craig, do you want to tell us a little bit? So first up, innovation consultant, what is that? And how on earth do you come to be working with Paul? And what's the story there?
Yeah, so I'm a consultant working in primarily in the kind of corporate innovation space. So I work on innovation strategy, helping organizations to organize, to innovate, and also get involved in kind of major innovation programs. And one of those programs we'll talk about today is currently underway with Mantis. And that is a program that very much builds on the Gardiner and the Mantis innovation DNA. But it's also something quite close to my heart. I've got a personal connection to this initiative. And that comes to the fact that I've known Paul since school days. So as a friend of Paul's, I had the privilege of witnessing the growth of Shamwari, its evolution from farmland in the Eastern Cape to a world-renowned reserve, pioneering conservation efforts. But also, as a local to that area, I was witness to how Shamwari changed the economy. Unrecognizable to what it was when I was a child growing up there, and the way that it allowed kind of enterprising locals to create businesses, generate jobs, whether it was building, food supplies, security, you name it. This ecosystem just blossomed around it, and it's just really kind of thinking that what happened there, and this development of this kind of local and regional prosperity around an initiative like Shamwari. Is, for me, really resonated with the theme of this talk, and so it's these kind of things that I think are going to play a really important.
I think it's important for everyone to recognise that in situations and presentations like this, it's always important to apply the thinking about, okay, so how could this affect my business and how could this affect my specific local situation? Because there are going to be lessons and takeaways from the stuff that we're covering in this session that you need to apply to your situation wherever that is. And there's just one thing to note is that we had one more guest who was going to be with us today, and that's James McBride. And unfortunately, he's not able to join, and it's a very practical issue. He was going to be calling in from the Sumba Island in Indonesia, and they had a storm last night, and it's knocked out telecommunications. So he's unable to join. The technology just wasn't able to support that. So our thought goes out to James and the management of the resort over there as they deal with a very community-based situation on the island right now. But what I want to do next is turn back again to Madhu and ask her to provide us with a little more context from her organization, some examples of maybe good practice and some of the things that's going on. And also make it pertinent to the situation we find ourselves in today. So, Madhu, if you want to take over and maybe share with us the presentation, that'll help.
Thanks, Ben. So I'll try and use the slides. I hope it's visible. So, I mean, when COVID-19 started, there was a lot of conversation that we were hearing about how the hotel industry faces an existential crisis. And clearly, these are very difficult times for the industry. But what I started seeing soon after was, a lot of hotels sort of beginning to engage with the emergency responses in their local communities. And for me, that's been quite touching to see how the industry, while it is admittedly on its knees and faces a very tough time currently, is looking to continue to work with its communities, with the governments on responding to the current crisis. So I start by sharing an image which which has hotels lighting up their hotel windows, sending positive messages to their communities. And this has been a standing feature across the globe where we are seeing this happen. Hope, love, heart-shaped lighting across the windows, because hotels are a very physical presence in the communities that they are in, and through that they're signaling to the communities that this will pass, and we are in this together, which is quite powerful. I think the second example that we've seen is, in a space of weeks, we've started seeing a lot of stories coming in and how hotels are opening their doors to some of the most vulnerable people in the communities. So whether that is hotels transforming into quarantine centers, or housing homeless people, or domestic violence victims in communities that need a safe space. That we are seeing increasingly a number of examples, and there are very unconventional ways of hotels being used, but increasingly hotels, large and small, are partnering with their local governments to form those kind of partnerships and open their doors. So that's another big trend we are seeing globally. And I think the third aspect that I'd like to share is, I've heard a lot today in this conference about people saying cash is king, and, managing the legal side of it and relationships with owners and investors. But for me, hospitality has been always about its people. And it's really heartening when I see hotel companies on the one side, recognizing that they have to furlough staff or lay off staff, but equally then stepping up and spending a lot of time and effort in finding alternative employment for those very employees. And we're seeing lots of examples coming from all our member companies about time and effort being spent in finding that employment. And we are also seeing how transferable the skills that hotels give you are. This is something that's not very often spoken about or recognized. But what we are finding is, companies like Amazon or Walmart or pharmacies are taking on hotel employees, because these are a talent pool that exists in the industry that can immediately begin to add value to other companies. So that's something that needs to be recognized. But the efforts that member companies or hotel companies globally that we're seeing in that regard, those efforts need to be recognized. If we then move to see one of the most poignant images that I've seen on social media and on television in recent times is a site in India. And I know for a fact that this is not just in India, but India announced a lockdown with very short notice. And millions of migrant workers in their metropolitan hubs, no food, no work, their daily wage laborers, nowhere to stay, found no option but to literally start walking back hundreds of kilometers back to their hometown. And literally roads, you're talking of a lockdown and social distancing, but these are scenes that I've seen in many parts of the world on how migrant laborers have responded to the lockdown. Nothing to eat, no money, and hotels across the world have stepped up to offer them food, in some cases to offer them accommodation. And Radisson in Bangalore, from what we've heard, has offered 150,000 meals a day to migrant laborers, and that's not a standalone example. We are also seeing hotels offer accommodation to healthcare and hospital workers, and also food delivery to hospital workers who don't have, who are on the front line and responding to the crisis. So all very powerful examples of how the industry is using the resources it has at its disposal to step up and make a difference. Just want to share with you some images that we see every day of different hotels lighting up in their communities and sending the message I spoke about earlier. Then you asked me to contextualize it and see how it's relevant in the current time. So, while we are right in the thick of it, it's very normal to think about the industry will take a long time to recover. Some brands may not exist. Some airlines, someone said in a previous panel may not exist, and it's about how you tide over the next few months. But I am also seeing, in the news about new hotel openings. We've heard from our partners in different countries that construction of hotels still continues. So there is hope. The industry knows that it will recover, and it has recovered from previous crises before. I look back to when I was selling hotels in the Middle East during 9/11 and the Iraq War and the SARS crisis, and it seemed like the world's ended, running hotels with 2%, 3% occupancy, and that too, most of the rooms occupied were house use rooms. They are very difficult times, but this is a very resilient industry which is known to rebound. And I think two things will remain very critical in this. One, in reflecting on previous crisis, a lot of it is not about what you do, it's about how you do it. So the soul, the heart of how the industry responds in the current time that we are seeing in the kind of interventions that are happening right now. And the lessons it learns as it rebuilds will be quite critical here as well. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about that, if I may. Clearly, at the moment, there are large-scale job losses across the industry. But, the industry has very transferable skills. I started my career in a hotel cleaning toilets. And the skills that I've acquired over 10 years working in the industry have stood me in good stead. And I've seen a number of colleagues who started in different positions and have gone on to do very interesting things. Many CEOs of our industry started at the grassroots level and have grown, progressed in their career. So the industry to create large-scale employment opportunities and grow its people, huge focus on growing its people. So that exists. And that is something that we will see as an increasing trend as the industry rebounds. But equally, many people across the world have been left very vulnerable and prone to exploitation by this crisis. And that is something that the industry will need to be very mindful of as it rebuilds, on emphasizing when business returns and there is a rush to recruit people back, making sure the recruitment processes are thought through in a way that people don't become prone to exploitation by middlemen and third parties, as we see that happens across the world. So I think that's going to be a critical part. And I guess the second thing I would say is we are seeing even now some hotel companies like Doran, for example, are taking a long-term view and continuing to invest in their sustainability initiatives, which is great to see, because as we come back, it is, as much as it's about the moral and the social business case for doing this, there will be pressure on finances. The industry will want to demonstrate return on investments for its investors. And sustainability is often seen as a cost, whereas the reality is, and we saw that with a piece of research that we published earlier this year, that if you are looking at sustainable design of hotels at the construction stage or at the refurbishment stage, some of these investments have very low payback periods and actually improve operational efficiencies and profitability. So I think, as the industry recovers, looking into it from a financial perspective and making the investments will be quite critical, because one of the things we're seeing right now is, as much as people are not thinking about traveling straight away till Q3, Q4, people are thinking about travel. We're all desperate to get out of our homes and these cages that we are in right now. And we do want to explore the world with a very different lens, because everyone's introspecting and thinking about the things that matter, the memories they want to create. And people will question, how did you respond during the crisis? What lessons did you learn? What are you going to be doing differently as a business to sort of make sure this kind of thing never happens again? And that's where the response the lessons we take on board right now and how the industry rebuilds will be very critical. So I will pause there, because I just want to conclude by saying we will travel again. And I really liked this from Hilton, which said the light and warmth of hospitality cannot be quarantined. So I'll take a pause there and over to you, back to you, Ben.
Okay, no, well, thank you very much for that, Madhu, and it does set the scene nicely. And I think there'll be a lot of people who are reconsidering their whole attitude towards many of these issues as they look to the future. And as they do that, we already have a few examples around the world of people who've taken this on board, and it's ingrained in their DNA. And that sets the scene up nicely for us to find out a little about one of the great examples of that today, and that's the Mantis Collection. But what I'd like to do to start with, Paul, if you wouldn't mind, is just to set the scene for us. What is the concept offer really at the heart of the Mantis business? And how do you balance all those great things about heart and soul with commercial viability? Can it be done, or will you always have to sacrifice something on the bottom line?
No, it's a good question. I think just right now, I suppose we as Mantis are less about being able to help the fight and the war on the ground, only because our hotels are so small and a lot of them are very remote. So we've literally gone into hibernation with many of them. But I think our fight begins when COVID ends, because what's happened is the poor communities that surround the Mantis properties are the biggest losers here. And then beyond that is obviously the wildlife, because when there's no money, there's no food. When there's no food, of course, they turn to the wildlife. And that's just survival, I'm afraid to say. So we've got a real mission to deal with post-COVID. And so, that, as I said, that's when our fight begins. And it is getting that balance right, because there are sacrifices that need to be made in achieving that. And so what we've done to support that effort is, instead of Mantis just doing it by ourselves with Accor, when we signed our deal 2 years ago, Dan and Sebastian agreed that they were going to form the CCFA, which stands for the Community Conservation Fund Africa. And so we formed this little NGO, and it's no longer little. It's getting some real traction. The idea at the time was to turn this into one of the biggest hospitality funds, certainly in Africa, and through basically generating money from our relationships with Accor, with loyalty club members and all kinds of people. And that's all ongoing in the background. But what the CCFA does is they're almost a grant fund. So we do all the fundraising internationally. We do some in South Africa too. And then that money comes down to South Africa. And then we distribute the funds to 3 NGOs who have a long-term relationship with Africa and many projects across Africa already. And those 3 NGOs are the Wilderness Foundation, which is based in Port Elizabeth, and that was founded by Dr. Ian Player, the late Dr. Ian Player. The second is the Tusk Trust, which is based in the UK, but has got amazing projects throughout Africa, their patron being Prince William, which is always good. And then the third is African Parks, and they technically go into countries that have had to deal with a lot of issues like war. And the country approaches African Parks and says, guys, we've got a national park which is totally decimated. Can you come in? They get some amazing lottery funding out of Holland, and they come and they fix that national park and turn it into a sustainable park again. And so that's where that's who we support. And those are the 3 NGOs that the CCFA supports. So we put all our energy behind the CCFA today as a group. And so that's kind of how we get that balance right. From a property perspective, we also do some interesting things. So, if you venture up into the Chobe area, which is between Botswana and Namibia, we've got a collection of 4 boats, the Zambezi Queen collection, and they are almost houseboats or luxury cruiser. We've just done several boreholes in the ground for the local villagers there, because they had a huge water issue. And then, of course, our guests get to access all those different projects that we're getting behind and support those local communities. And we get some really interesting donations from them. At our little lodge called Founders Lodge, which is adjacent to Shamwari Game Reserve, what we do there is when we get a family group coming in, we try and prize a rhino darting procedure, because we have to dart our big rhinos occasionally to either saw off the horn or implant a transmitter or take some DNA samples. And so we save those special occasions for very special guests, and they would pay a premium for that, and then all of that gets recycled back into the equation. So those are the sort of things that we do to try and get that balance right. So there certainly are sacrifices in the eco lodge space. You've got to give back in order to be rewarded, and I think it's what makes it so special for our guests too. Is they get to see some incredible behind the scenes activity of what's going on. They're not just lying on a beach. We refer to it as the conscious traveler. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, the way that nature is waking up while we all locked up in our homes has been amazing, and I think there's going to be so much more respect for it, and that's why I think Mantis is so well primed for the future when we get out of this mess. It's going to take a while, but I often refer to it as nature giving humanity its first red card, its first real red card. And so hopefully we've all woken up to the fact that we've got to, start doing more conscious traveling. And so I think a lot of good could come out of it for Mantis and other people that play in the ecotourism space.
So you've explained a little bit about the product and the kind of experience, but just think for a minute, who are the people that come, and are they a particularly weird section of the traveling population? And are they all young? Are they all young? Do families come? And do you think that's going to change over time, given where we're going to when this is over?
Yeah, I was listening to a panel a bit earlier, the adventure panel, and Al Gosling mentioned that, the traveler is probably going to be, the initial traveler as we come out of this is probably going to be the young adventurer who, they just get up and go and life carries on for them, and they want to get their Instagram moment going and all of that. They're bursting. So they're bursting for it. So I think that's going to be interesting. But the traveler that we attract now it's actually very broad. I mean, family is vital, and we get family groups coming through, and I think that's because of that strong education facet to our business. And you're learning; it's a learning holiday as well as a conscious holiday. So I think that is a sweet spot for us. But I think it's also going to be a growth market for us. But this is obviously further down the line when we become more confident in our travel. We definitely attract that adventure market. If you look at the brand platform for our group today, it is about the adventure that we're attracting. And it's not an extreme sports person. It's just something that somebody that's interested in nature and escapism and all of that. So, we also have another business as part of Mantis, which is called Worldwide Experience. And Worldwide Experience is targeted at the youth. It's a behind-the-scenes experience that is offered at multiple game reserves across the continent of Africa. It's targeted at a sort of, I would say, probably 17, 18 to 21-year-old. And they come out for 1, 2, or 3 months, and they work behind the scenes with the wildlife department, just learning the intricacies of what makes a game reserve tick. And it's hell of an educational, and we do a similar program called Vets Go Wild, and we get all the vet schools around the world and students from those schools coming to us too, and they work alongside our vets, and they get the most incredible experience doing that. So I think that's going to be a growth market too. Again, that conscious traveler, youngsters wanting to learn more, unearth what the hell's going on out there in the world of conservation and certainly ecotourism.
And tell us, one of the things that I was interested in, we're seeing a lot more coverage from over the last, 6 weeks, 6 months even, with from David Attenborough through to Greta, through to Bear Grylls, exploring new areas. And so you do get a sense that there's a little bit more engagement than there ever has been before, and surely that's going to step up. Are there opportunities for you to look at? People are going to be thinking about survival, and have you got any initiatives that fall off the back of some of that stuff?
We are very fortunate to have an amazing relationship and business with Bear Grylls. If you don't know who he is kind of the face of adventure. He's a TV personality, amazing guy. I mean, if you talk about somebody with passion and enthusiasm and resilience and all of those good things, I mean, he just oozes that. And so Mantis has been very fortunate that we have this relationship with him. And several years ago, I met Bear by chance, and we formed the Bear Grylls Survival Academy together. And so it's taking what he does on television and bringing it to life for kids, for adults, for corporate team building. And so we've taken an interesting IP and we've turned it into a business outside of TV for Bear. And it's been an amazing journey because we've started licensing that model and products to other resorts across the planet. So we're working with Sani Resorts now, and they've asked for a corporate team building product and a product for teenagers and for younger kids and families. So we're rolling that out with them. We've done an amazing deal with Russell Kaimer in the Emirates, and so we're working with RAK Hospitality to set up a whole course in the Jebel Jay Mountains alongside the longest zip line in the world. And we're also going to be announcing an interesting lodge concept, which I won't go into now because it's not common knowledge, but with our Bear brand. And so there's going to be lots of news on that breaking as things start opening up. So there's a lot of positive stuff on the horizon, but what a positive brand to be able to bring to the market, because I think, as you rightly said, Ben, it's time for these IPs to stand up, stand tall, talk about conservation, talk about community, and Mantis is starting to build more and more relationships like that. I've just embarked on a really interesting one myself, and this is not common knowledge or public knowledge yet because we haven't even announced it, but I took a celebrity out to South Africa about 5 weeks ago, and we went and did we filmed a 20-minute little mini documentary, and it's him and I going out on an adventure together, but all associated with wildlife and community. And I've seen the first edit of that, and it's really cool. And the idea is that this celebrity that I've taken out challenges the next one to come with me, and so we've just done Founders Lodge. The next one is probably going to be Rwanda with the gorillas. But there's quite an interesting platform because my two passions are conservation and running. And so think carpool karaoke without the car and without the singing. And I take somebody on a run, and we go and we meet different characters on my run together. So I will share that with you when we eventually go live. We're a few weeks away from that. But I think it's well primed as well because, again, it's tying back to the essential things on this planet right now, community and conservation.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's only look forward to seeing how that comes out. So, Madhu, we know that Mantis is already embedded, and it's really through Adrian's initiative and vision and all the rest of it. But it's still on a reasonably concise, modest scale in the scheme of things. And I know from your background working professionally in the sector that there are some big brands out there with an awful lot of key count. And so do you think that you're going to be getting phone calls coming through in the next few months as people start to maybe think, should we be engaging more in conservation? Should we be more responsible? Should we be in touch with the community, engaging with the local colleges and universities? And will they be doing that off their own bat, or will they be doing that because the rest of us, Joe Public, actually expect it and will be expecting it in the future?
So the short answer is yes. I certainly hope and expect that people will be more conscious of how they engage with their local communities and with the sustainability agenda. And we see that already. Brands, companies, individuals get in touch with us and say, how can we work together? How can we use some of the tools, resources that your organization creates? So that's increasingly happening anyways, and I think that'll accelerate as a result of what we will learn and the transformation we will go through during this crisis. Whether that happens because of their own initiative or whether that happens in response to customer demand, it really doesn't matter. I think it'll be a combination of both, where brands will want to engage themselves, but increasingly they will see their guests, they will see their staff wanting to work for brands that stood for a purpose, and it wasn't just about making money. So I think it'll be a combination of factors, but I certainly think in the long term, the way of doing business will change, and it will need to be more with the soul as much as with the wallet. Okay.
And I think we're going to expect we're going to see a whole lot more innovation and interest associated with that, and the simple fact that Accor are now so involved with Mantis is an interesting one, and I think we'll see a few more tie-ups like that. But if we think about the future and this being taken to the next level, it brings us quite nicely, Craig, to the whole idea of the hub and the Founders Hub, and Paul alluded to it just now. But as we start now to think about the future, explain a little bit about what that is and what it's designed to do, and just to set the scene for us on that initiative.
Do you think we've got time for the video? Paul, do you want to just quickly go ahead?
Yeah, let's just have a couple of minutes of there. This will help set the scene for us. If we don't have any sound, you're going to have to explain, Craig.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. So this video was very much a kind of a mood video around the initial concepts around the Eco Innovation Hub, and in this very much focused on the history and where it's got to, but also very much focused on some of the kind of, I suppose, the more kind of, sorry, the physical manifestations of what an Eco Innovation Hub might be. So located in the Eastern Cape, a variety of properties, a variety of experiences, working with partners to try and kind of bring these things to life. But I think, you know, going into a bit of detail of that, these are some of the kind of architectural designs and talking about the various types of concepts. The idea being that you could bring people to a central location and start to talk about the possibilities and really start to kind of innovate around their audiences and what their audiences' needs might be, and start to construct something and move that forward. But I think, you know, that's very much one part of it, and I think while in terms of a kind of innovation hub kind of perspective, we can get really focused on the physical side of things. I think it's also important to recognize that innovation isn't just about these kind of novel ideas. It's not just about these new things or kind of technological advancements. It's also about a combination of things that already exist, and how you combine those to create new products, new services, new processes, and create new value. So beyond that physical manifestation of what the hub is and its location back in the heart of the Eastern Cape, where the ecosystem, so the economy I spoke about earlier, evolved, is this idea that the hub is an open innovation program, and this allows Mantis to play a role in co-creating, co-innovating, promoting the ecosystem that they've built up over the years. And that's, you know, that's obviously working very closely with key partners, but also regionally. So, you know, as a concept, there's a realization that we have a kind of a connection and access that some of these regional and local entrepreneurs might not have, and this idea of what role can the hub play in promoting and growing those initiatives. So really about, you know, helping them grow themselves, and then allowing them to support initiatives further. And we kind of view this as a model that is very, you know, extendable to new ventures, and something that investors and entrepreneurs should be considering as part of their strategies. So this idea to look beyond that kind of primary initiatives and build those ecosystems and focus on that ecosystem development and that local, regional and partner growth together. So it's really much along the ideas of a philosophy that, you know, the stronger that ecosystem, you know, the more able you are to innovate. And it kind of brings that economic side to the conversation today. And it's really that kind of, you know, this idea to kind of the need in the months and the years ahead to work with the partners to co-create and to be able to innovate for that next phase of what the business is. So this very much a kind of the role that these initiatives can play, not just in terms of kind of that initial thing, the primary experience, but actually thinking about everything around it that makes it tick, and not forgetting that as we move forward and rebuilding, and actually have that opportunity to work together, to collaborate, and actually kind of co-create and bring that whole ecosystem together.
Okay, no, it's a great initiative, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it evolves. As we start to look to the future with this, looking ahead. Paul, tell us a little bit about what the plans are for Mantis. Is this something that started in Africa and will always kind of work in an African context? But we've got the world, and everyone from all corners of the world are on the conference today, literally all corners of the world. And is this is the vision and the principles that you're talking about, are they equally achievable in the north of Scotland or in Costa Rica, or where's Mantis going to go next? And are these things applicable everywhere?
They certainly are. I think, as you say, our DNA and our foundations are very much in Africa, and the model we've proved it works, and there's so many others that have proved it has worked there. We don't stand alone. There's the wilderness safaris, there's and beyond. Singita, there's some amazing brands that have grown out of South Africa and just spread their wings across the continent today. So we're in good company, and I think the opportunity for us now is to take that DNA and that model beyond the borders of Africa. And so we have started that. We've got inquiries from all over the place. You mentioned Costa Rica. We are involved there with an eco-lodge called Origins. We are looking at something in Montenegro, which is quite interesting, an eco-lodge in one of the big lakes there. We're looking at two very serious projects in the Jebel Jay Mountains in Ras Al Khaimah, and one on the coast. So there's some interesting things going on there, and the inquiries just keep coming. I mean, I've just been with my colleague Ashley to Jordan. And, we went to Petra. It was a country that I'd never been to. And obviously, it's one of those bucket list countries. And we were only there about 5 weeks ago before everything kicked off. But I had the most amazing 3 days. We crammed so much into the 3 days. And I just fell in love with the place. And there's a real opportunity there, because the eco-lodge model has been done very cheaply. And it's fine. I respect that. They've tested a few things. And they've done it off a shoestring. And I just think if some of these players could move into that space, they would have such success, because people want to move away from the big bricks and mortar buildings. And it's all about intimacy and personal and all of those good things. And that's really what we stand for. And then having that eco twist to back you up. So my vision and our group's vision over here, certainly, because we split up. Dad heads up Africa, and I tend to head up the UK with my small team here. There are only 5 of us, but we're on a mission to take what we've done in Africa and spread it far and wide in an ethical way, just taking all those good things that we've learned in Africa to other parts of the world. And one of the ways we're wanting to do that too is because there are so many beautiful products that exist in Patagonia, in Canada, in Australia, across the planet. You've just come back from Iceland and so on and so forth. These little things are popping up everywhere. So we want to offer a model, and it's a franchise model, but for the eco-lodge space. And I think we'll be the first ones to do that. And we can do that now because we have our big brother backing us up, as in Accor. So suddenly we can plug a little eco-lodge into an amazing loyalty program with Accor. And, they've just revived that whole thing, and it's called All, which is just amazing. And then all their distribution and those platforms that we as a little Mantis never had before, we now have. So I think the world is now our oyster to start approaching a lot of those smaller outfits and seeing if we can contribute. And what I'd really like, and our team would really like, is to be the one-stop shop for an eco holiday in the future.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of our time, but I've just been keeping half an eye on the chat that's been going on whilst we've had the session. And Melissa Stoneman, you had a lovely observation about people wanting to work in an environment that's meaningful and not just profitable. And I think that's going to become increasingly true. Klaus has added lots of interesting comments. Lengfeld about hotels and the hotel employee and staff being part of a family, and now we should be drawing together, maybe as we've never done before. And then Tassia Alexandria was asking about innovation initiatives, and I'm sure there's some follow-up that can be taken forward there with Craig. But Madhu, I was wondering, with regard to your organization, are there sort of materials and things that you have that can help people who are beginning to think that maybe we should be increasing our focus here on this more sort of heart and soul and responsible and community-driven attitude? And what are they? What do you have? And how do folk get hold of them?
Absolutely, Ben. That's a really good question. And yes, we have a number of tools, resources, which are freely available on our website that really help any hotel, whether large, small, starting off on the sustainability journey to get started. Lots of practical know-how guides, toolkits, resources, fact sheets to help organizations get started. So if you haven't been to our website already, please do visit it, and you'll find them. Over the summer, we are reviewing the whole bank of our resources, and we will be upgrading many of those as well and contextualizing them in light of the recent crisis. So please, keep a lookout for those. I think, Ben, if I may, I would like to take the liberty of just adding a couple of final comments of what I see coming out of this crisis as well, because I do feel, large, small hotels across the world will be more interested in sustainability, and as an industry organization, we'd love to be able to support them. I think the other trend that I see coming is, over the last 12, 18 months, the over-tourism debate was getting very loud in many places. And what this crisis has shown is that when tourism stops, it actually impacts the economies quite significantly, because tourism is a big income generator, sometimes, very often, for some of the most vulnerable people. So I think what will come out of this crisis is a more balanced approach to sustainable tourism, recognizing its economic impact, but with a focus on the way business is done. And in that, the role of partnerships, both within the industry and outside the industry, and working with the governments, will become increasingly important. So this is almost a call for action from me. If there are government stakeholders, if there are funders that are driven by social impact, would love to hear from them and see how we can form public-private partnerships, bring the industry together with those stakeholders to amplify impact. It would be great to connect and see what we can do together.
Okay. And I think I'd almost want to end on a note of concern, I suppose, in some respects. We know, and we're watching the news day to day, and the situation in the UK is particularly strange with the Prime Minister. But I'm very conscious of the fact that Africa and India have these massive populations and extraordinary population densities in specific areas around townships and around slum areas and things. I have a brother who works for the World Bank, and he lives in Addis Ababa, and he's keeping me up to date with the situation in Ethiopia. But Paul, I am really concerned that we haven't seen anything yet in some respects. And I'm sure that you're plugged into the situation in Africa and having regular conversations with folk there. And I just wondered if you have any kind of comment or thoughts on how things are in Africa. I know that you guys are trying to do your bit, but the scale of the potential issue must be huge, right?
It's still early days. I think we're closing in on about 2,000 cases. The death rate has been very low, thank heavens. But it is a major concern. I mean, we all very, very worried that, when it enters the townships, where does it stop? So our president's been amazing. President Ramaphosa shut the country down a couple of weeks ago, ahead of many others, while it was still very low and contained. So stopped all flights. And so we did all the right things. And I think we were, as a nation, we were very impressed. And Siya Kolisi, our Springbok rugby captain's been very vocal, and he's doing a lot. And I think they've used, this is a very much a personal opinion, because they're coming out of lockdown in about a week or two's time. What happens then? Does he extend? And of course, when you're talking a country with an unemployment rate of around between 30 and 40%, how long can you sustain a lockdown for? That's the problem. Here in the UK, we're getting major grants and support and furlough allowances and everything. None of that's happening down there, or to a lesser degree. I mean, they're doing what they absolutely can. And so I think they're probably going to have to come out of this pretty soon in order to be able to continue. But I think what Cyril Ramaphosa has done is he's allowed the last 3 weeks for the country to actually get its hospitals in order, build pop-up hospitals, get all the services sorted out, and the infrastructure they've almost prepared for the battle now. That's going to come, and we can only hope and pray that it isn't as bad as some parts of Europe. That's where I think we are, and that we come through this. But I don't even want to think further than that, because I'll just go to a very dark place every time I do. So, but I think I'm hopeful that our team and our country are ready for the war that's about to hit them, and hopefully we succeed. Because as I said right at the start of this, is we got into this. We were the first industry to be affected, and I'm afraid we're going to be the last one to come out of it too. The rest of the world will tick on, but our poor industry is going to take the brunt of this. And then, as I said, when you've got a continent so reliant on tourism, every country on the planet has got its own battle to fight. So we're not going to be knocking on Britain's door for support. Nobody's door is going to be open, because they've all had to pour money into sustaining their own country. So it's not going to be easy. But I know South Africans, a resilient nation. We've dealt a lot of knocks in the past, and for some reason we sort of bounced back from them all. So hopefully we're a model for the rest of the continent. I don't know. That's about as much as I can say, but. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. And all of the countries represented on this extraordinary conference today is dealing with this in their own way, and we're all very much in it together. But I think it's been really encouraging. It's been great to have you guys on the session and thinking about this idea of hospitality with heart and soul. And I'm sure it's going to be something which increases in focus as we pick ourselves up and we carry on and we enter in the next phase of the hospitality sector. And I think to everyone who's joined us this afternoon, I have absolutely no doubt all of the people who've been part, you can find on LinkedIn. It's all very easy. So I think if you have any more specific questions, or you'd like to find out what they're up to, or what Craig has got in store in the Founders Innovation Hub, I'm sure that he'll provide you with more information. The website for Madhu is very easy to find. It's in the chat session. Somebody pinged it up, so that was thank you very much for doing that. And I think it's also best, and all of us are working with 3 or 4 different types of platform for these things, whether that's Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams. And when we were told that we had to use another new platform, my heart kind of sank. But the reality is it's kind of been okay in terms of tech. So thank you all for surviving the tech, and we should definitely be thanking Jonathan and the bench team for having this initiative go forward. And we're all adapting to it, and this is proved reasonably painless in terms of tech. So thanks to them, and thank you to the delegates. Thank you guys for being panelists today.
Thanks for hosting us, Ben. Thank you very much. And to Jonathan and the bench team, from all of us, I speak on all of our behalf, I guess. We're very grateful. And I think it's quite refreshing to have had this opportunity to talk, because, we are all in lockdown, and it's something to look forward to. There's something, we've got to have a few little lights, and I think this is certainly given us a bit of hope, because it's all about community, what Craig alluded to too. We've got to keep in touch with each other. And competitors will talk to competitors, and let's fix it together. So very grateful to you.
All right, well, look, thank you everyone, and I have no doubt that we're going to be seeing more of these things as the weeks go by. But thank you very much for being part of it, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.